Welcome back to Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. We are going to talk about this is a more complicated subject. It's the Export-Import Bank and the reauthorization of this bank. It's an 80-year-old federal lending agency. It has to be renewed, and it has been multiple times throughout this 80-year history, but it's coming up right now to be renewed. It's been on life support, I guess I would say, with a temporary extension that was a 9-month extension, 8 or 9 months. But now it's coming up to the end of June, and if it is not reauthorized, then it will go away. I have invited today Vic Parrish to join us to talk about this subject. Vic he ended his career, retired from Energy Northwest out on the Hanford site. His interest in this subject of Export-Import Bank has nothing to do with his work out there, but Vic has told me that he is looking at a number of ways in our community here that he can share some of the knowledge that he's developed and work on various projects. So, Vic does not want to see the Export-Import Bank renewed. First, tell us why, Vic. Why?
Well, I think, Christine, the principal reason is that the Export-Import Bank has too many adverse consequences that are associated with its operation. And I think the one that principally is most concerning to me has become an instrument of political influence, which it was never intended to be. It was really intended to be a business function when Franklin Delano Roosevelt created it back in 1934 to facilitate the ability of U.S. companies to export and import and do commerce with other nations. And that was true and needed at that point in time, and I think that right now it's gotten to the point where it's really a tool for political influence and not necessarily serving its function.
Well, what do you mean by that? Political influence? How?
Well, it's being used to promote agenda items. Example, one that does associate with Energy Northwest would be the energy marketplace. It's been a clearly stated objective of the Export-Import Bank to promote green energy projects, and not to indicate that I'm against green energy projects in any fashion. In fact, my home was built such that it generates 70% of its energy from solar panels. Mm-hmm. But there is a way that things like that should be done. They should be done based on the marketplace and on what the costs are to the end user, to you and me, and whether it be a purchaser or whether it be a taxpayer. And the behavior of the Export-Import Bank in having an agenda that they clearly stated, their director has stated that they're, promote green energy on a global scale is one example of it. I think that there are a lot of other things that are out there that when you look at it, you look at the U.S.'s total exports. I mean, how much export business that's done by America, by the United States on an annual basis is $2.5 trillion. And I like to remind myself, when I start talking numbers about dollars, I like to remind myself just how much a billion is. If we went back a billion seconds in time, we'd be sometime in 1984. And I use that to remind me of what I'm talking about as numbers go. So you've got a situation where you look across America at how many billions and trillions of dollars that we export on an annual basis, $2.5 trillion. If you look at the amount that actually is influenced by the Export-Import Bank, it's less than 2%. It's 1.6%. Mm-hmm. Still, that's a large amount of money. But then when you start looking at the benefactors of those, you have small businesses, minority business, women-owned businesses, which was the intent when I think Franklin Delano Roosevelt created this organization, was to make opportunities for companies to compete in a global marketplace. And when you look at it now, and you look at the numbers that the Export-Import Bank promote, they talk about, 90% of our transactions, our swings of the bat, so to speak, go to small business, minority, and women-owned. That sounds awful good, but when you look at how much money we're talking about, you find out that 74% of the money that they dispense essentially goes to 10 or 12 large corporations, of which one in the state of Washington is Boeing.
Mm-hmm.
Boeing gets 63, I think the current number is about 63%
Mm-hmm.
of all the funds that are allocated by the Export-Import Bank.
But they are also providing some 45 to 65,000 jobs. So you do not see that as value?
Oh, yeah, Boeing is absolutely.
I mean, the jobs are valuable, yes. I mean,
That's the jobs are valuable.
But I mean, having the use of the Export-Import Bank and getting those jobs out of the deal, you don't.
There is a, I guess there is an attempt to point to the fact that if Boeing loses its ability to get funds via the Export-Import Bank, that they will lose those jobs. Nothing is further from the truth.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Boeing has more backlog. They have a backlog of over I think it's $441 billion of work that's out there. And they're able to cope with probably $35 to $40 billion of work a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think that if the Export-Import Bank just goes poof and is gone, that Boeing won't continue to work and build airplanes is absolutely incorrect and insane. The question is does Boeing need a government agency that's backed by the taxpayer to go out and get private, to get money from the government on a loan in order to sell their airplanes and finance their airplanes? 98% of the exports from America go through private financing when they need to make that. So why does Boeing need to be able to use the Export-Import Bank to get money to finance and back their sales overseas? In fact, the Boeing executive said that they could go out in the private marketplace and get money to back their sales. So the argument that we'll lose jobs or jobs will be lost is absolutely flawed. And that's you're hitting on the exact reason that I'm sitting here and I have this as an issue. If it were truly a job loss, I'd be on the other side of the coin, but it's not. It's smoke and mirrors.
Yes, okay. All right, well, what about the issue that the interest and all that comes from Boeing is then put back into the federal government?
Well, it depends on whose books you look at. That's the problem, is the Export-Import Bank, and all I have to do is remind myself of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who were using their own books a number of years ago, and said, we're doing good. We have less than a 0.1% default rate on our mortgages, and lo and behold, guess what happened, right? That's the case. And the same thing is true of the Export-Import Bank. When you look at their books and let them make their numbers and their arguments about how good they are, but when you get any outside group that comes and looks at their books, they tell you that nay. There's a lot of risk that's out there for the taxpayers, if the Export-Import Bank at some point in the future goes the same route as Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and that's the real issue. That's when you really get down to it. And you talk about Boeing as an example, and you think about the other people on the other end of Boeing's product line, the Delta Airlines and the, all the other airlines that buy Boeing aircraft from them. Delta actually sued the Export-Import Bank, and the reason they sued them was because of the good deals that Boeing was able to offer to Delta's international competitors' airlines.
Yes,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the Delta sued the Export-Import Bank. And so you have to ask yourself, when you see that sort of stuff happen, why is that? And so when you start to really dig into the details, you find out all sorts of things about, about how the activity works and who the benefactors are. And when you look at the percentage of what the original intent was that's being satisfied with what the organization does now, it's not there. You found too many examples. One example, again, getting closer to my energy background, is a company called, First Solar. The Export-Import Bank loaned First Solar $445 million to buy solar panels from itself. So why do you do that? I haven't dug into that particular issue, but when I say, why would I buy something that I make myself? Is it well-intentioned, or is there something behind this that's unclear and uncertain. You know, certainly looking at a $445 million sale of solar panels, you know, would look good on the investors' books for this company, and it'll look good maybe on the auditors' things, but, you know, why? What was the reason for something like that? Would Banner Bank or would another private loan agency loan a company $445 million to buy their own product?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, Vic, we're going to take a break here, but there are a couple of things very particular that I want to talk about when we come back. One has to do with all the political ramifications, all of the jockeying that's gone on in the past week or so, or 10 days, to even have a vote on this issue. And then secondarily, whether or not the Export-Import Bank is being used by people here, businesses here in the Columbia Basin, which I think most of us care most about. So, stick with us, Vic. We'll be back in just a moment, and we can talk more about the Export-Import Bank. Welcome back to Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown, and my guest today right now is Vic Parrish. We are talking about the Export-Import Bank and whether or not it will be reauthorized. The decision is going to be made pretty soon, though, don't you think, Vic? I mean, if there are no votes in Congress, it will die a natural death at the end of June.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen a flurry of activity to even get a vote scheduled. And I guess what was interesting for us here in the Northwest is that last week, that was maybe about 10 days ago now or so, there were trade promotion authority discussions going on and vote going on in the Senate. And Maria Cantwell from the state of Washington was able to really hold her vote at bay with a bunch of other Democrats and basically negotiate with Mitch McConnell that he would create this opportunity to vote on this measure in the Senate before the end of June. So then she voted yes. So do we think that has a lot to do with Boeing?
I think it financially and Boeing's ability to stay in business and keep all its employees working and sell airplanes around the planet, I think it has absolutely no bearing whatsoever. Because what we talked about here earlier as far as how Boeing, finances and sells its aircraft in the competitive marketplace and the backlog that they have out there for work that's already on orders that they've got to fill. I don't think it has anything to do with the viability and continued viability of Boeing aircraft. I think that has nothing to do with it. I think the issue, in one man's opinion, is that it's mainly driven by votes and financial support for groups and candidates, that are out there in the world of politics. Every time this part of the conversation comes up, I think back to the 2008 campaign when President Barack Obama, when he was on the campaign trail, was talking about examples of government agencies that have seen their useful life and should be allowed to die and go their way, the natural process of dying. And one of the first examples he gave was the Export-Import Bank.
Okay.
So when you look at that, and I don't agree with President Obama on many things, but actually that one he got it right, in my opinion, after I spent time looking at it. I can't speak personally to the Senator Cantwell's motives. I did, when she was having, her discussions with Senator McConnell and a lot of the news articles that came out and some of the examples that she used of the benefactors in Washington State of the Export-Import Bank. She cited one small company up in Yakima that exports music stands, as I recall, as being a benefactor of the Export-Import Bank. As I pointed out earlier, the fraction of the dollars, the actual funds, the transactions are great for the small businesses just by numbers because there's so many out there, but the actual money that gets parsed out in support is less, is much, much smaller. The largest part of the money goes to Boeing and GE and Caterpillar and companies like that.
So McConnell has said, Senator McConnell has said he will make available a vote in the month of June. But already John Boehner from the House side has said that he will not.
Right.
So I guess there's going to have to be a little maneuvering on the other side before there would even be a vote. If no vote, then it's done.
Right.
It dies.
It dies.
Yeah.
It dies at death at the end of June. That's correct.
Yeah.
So, yep, you're right. It's and like I said at the very beginning, I oppose the export-import bank. I think it's something that should go its way, and I'm actually looking forward to the discussions that takes place to see where they end up. But I certainly hope it goes as it looks like it's going to go right now. That it's allowed to expire.
To sunset, as it were. So, you know, our area, the Columbia Basin, is involved in a lot of exporting. Obviously, we are exporting a lot of food, agriculture around the planet. Originally, that made me think, wow, so we must have a lot of but you know, companies, farmers using the export-import bank.
Yeah,
Have you found any?
Actually, you know, I know of no large agricultural exporters that do it. And as we were talking prior to coming on the interview here, to the best of my knowledge, there's only just a handful of companies up through the central part of Washington State that actually utilize the Export-Import Bank. And I've actually told businesses in the Tri-Cities, some of which were aware of export-import and have chosen not to use it because they can get better rates for financing their overseas operations, you know, through private lending sector. So, and when you look at the dollars that actually come into Washington State, you know, Boeing is just so big. If you look at a map that, you know, has a picture of the states that are benefactors of export-import, there's one state that stands out boldly, and it's Washington, and
Yes.
it's driven totally by Boeing.
Mm-hmm.
So I know of none. I'm not saying they're there, but I don't think that there are that many up through across Washington State that are actually using the Export-Import Bank, and they certainly are small amounts and percentage-wise of the revenue that the Export-Import Bank.
Well, how did you ever get interested in this topic to begin with? I mean,
Well,
you're not in the business of export, are
no,
you?
Not really, and I don't desire to be. But I am a taxpayer, and I
Okay.
worry about what our government is doing with hard-earned money that it take from us every paycheck every day, and this is just one of a number of issues that caught my attention. And really, there were just a couple of things about it. You know, I was aware of the Export-Import Bank probably in the late '90s when we were doing a lot of looking at green energy and stuff. It's not something that would have been a tool that would have been used in anything that we were involved in, but it just caught my attention. And then as you look at some of the news press and some of the things that come on the radar screen, like the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank, you know, it just got my curiosity up, so I decided I'd inform myself. I'd really learn and spend some time to understand the issues that were out there and whether this was something I should be supporting, the reauthorization, or whether I should not. And at the end of my quest, I came up firmly convinced that this is a bad thing. It's really turned into a political instrument where policies and other things can be driven by who gets the money and who doesn't get the money. The books, you know, if you just look at the Export-Import Bank, when you start asking questions about who are the benefactors, who are the international bodies that we are either loaning money to for them, you know, essentially capital investments in foreign companies, or we're loaning and guaranteeing loans so they can buy products from us. And you ask them to identify those things, and only half actually, when you go back through, can you actually truly identify who the benefactors are. And when you roll in the fact that, you know, that Export-Import can loan money to government agencies, to China and to Russia, you have to ask the question, you know, with the goods that are being sold, where are these things going? Are we in fact financing some activity that we absolutely have no knowledge of? If we did know, we would never do it, but we just don't. So it's, in my mind, it's just something that when it was put in place, it had a real purpose, it was necessary, but now it's run its useful life and it should be allowed to expire and go its own way.
Okay, so right now trade issues have really come to the forefront, and you know, for many, many years they haven't been.
Right.
They're all. What in your research that you have done have you learned are the biggest barriers for American companies to be on equal ground selling their products around the world?
What the government takes and charges businesses to do business in America. In other words, American businesses, the corporate tax rates kill us. If you look at graphs across the global graphs of what the corporate tax structure looks like and the biggest burdens that are there, the one that is the right justified highest number is the United States of America. And if we wanted to do something,
So, no, I'm talking about trade issues.
trade issues,
No.
well, you know.
I'm 0 down, not just
Okay.
corporate taxes.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Ta-
it does
trade,
impact.
trade.
Yeah, it impacts companies' ability to do business, and it also But as far as trade issues, I think that what would I say is the major contributor to improving trade. And there's a number of things that could happen. I think the quality of the product. The marketplace is going to be driven by who does the best job of generating a product that demands things. I could think of companies that have said the same.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay.
That the quality of the product, because sometimes inferior products are on the market, but they've been given a number of advantages by their home country in terms of tariffs and the cost of creating the product and other kinds of things that get in the way.
Well, yeah, I think
a lot of our agriculture is by far and away top quality on the planet. And other countries, though, are producing maybe a little inferior apples or different kinds of fruits and produce, and yet their products make it to the international market.
Yeah, but the point is, Americans go into the supermarket and pick up the avocado that says a product of Chile, and it's what the marketplace demands, and if America's buy American, I agree with that. I look for that product when I buy a ball cap. I ask myself that question, but the character.
Well, you must have to go to a number of stores then.
No, actually, NRA has them that has it made in the USA. In fact, there's one in my truck. So that's really it. The marketplace is what drives where you're at. It's what the people are willing to buy. I think back to when I was growing up, when you had the first CD players came out. And I asked myself, how much does it cost to build this thing? I was paying like $29 for it, and realizing, being an engineer, a technical guy, this thing probably would cost hundreds of dollars to build. So how can it be done so cheaply? And that's really what we need to think about. I'm all Buy American. I'm all American energy independent. That to me is the strength of the nation, and that's what we need to be doing. And we need to have a government that recognizes what the sacrifices that the individuals, the businesses are making to support the government and provide the infrastructure and services to let that just blossom and grow and not be a hindrance to entrepreneurs. I think about how can we make it such that a business in America is one that will survive. And you look across the state of Washington as an example at small businesses. I know of many small businesses that have started and died because of the difficulty in doing business in Washington State and across America, not just Washington. But we could all make some changes across the country about supporting small business and small business growth.
I've heard that before, Vic, but there are also some studies literally that have shown that Washington is one of the most friendly business states in the United States. So I'm not sure I buy that argument anymore.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, like I said, all you have to do is look at the numbers, number of small business
Well,
failures
small
and stuff
businesses
like that.
are extremely difficult to keep alive. Absolutely. So I'm not sure I buy that one, but there are a lot of regulations. There are no doubt about that.
Oh, I can tell you about regulations. That's a fact. So
Yeah.
that's another point we can talk about at some future interview.
Yes. All right. Why don't we take a break here? We'll reorganize ourselves when we'll be back to share more with you. Vic Parrish is sitting here, and he's just a wealth of information, and we'll be able to leach it out of him, that's for sure. Stay with us. This is News Talk 870.